In less than 24 hours, President Biden will come face-to-face with Russian President Vladimir Putin. In fact, their meetings may have wrapped up by this time tomorrow. While it isn't their first meeting ever, it is safe to say this is the most important. Democratic New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez is joining us now. He's the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. Senator, thanks for taking the time. Last week on the Senate floor, you said Russia is a, quote, mafia state run by a vicious authoritarian and his inner circle of corrupt oligarchs, not a normal country. So that said, President Biden has told aides he believes Putin will respond to directness, and he wants to be ready to offer a frank message. What does he need to say to Putin?
Well, I think President Biden's going in clear-eyed. He himself has called him a ruthless killer, and that's what he is. And I think what he's going to say is, look, you continuously challenge the United States in ways that affects our national securities by permitting ransomware attacks, by engaging in our elections, violate the international order by the use of chemical weapons to assassinate your opponents in countries abroad, annexation of Crimea. All of these actions are not only in violation of the international norms, but also some real challenges to the United States. And here's what's going to happen if you continue to do that. And I think that that clear and precise message, especially after 4 years of having President Trump, who basically coddled Putin, is going to be a stark reality for Putin and something that is good for him to hear firsthand from the President of the United States.
Do you have any concerns about this meeting at all? What would be your biggest worry?
I don't have concerns, particularly because I know that President Biden is very steeped in foreign policy. He served in the role that I have as chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, vice president of the United States. He understands Putin. He's going in there clear-eyed. I'd be worried if he thought that Putin is someone he could turn around to ultimately be a great ally of the United States. But that's not how he's going in there. He's looking for some type of predictable, stable relationship. And that's desirable. The question is whether you can get that with Putin. Putin sees that in his actions, not only does he achieve what he wants, but creates instability in the world. Mm-hmm. And so there has to be a clear message that there's going to be a consequence for that. For example, there are still pending chemical weapons sanctions that should be levied under our existing law for what he did to Alexei Navalny. There is potentially tremendous opportunities to go after the oligarchs, the rich, supplicants of his that are his via to money. You freeze their accounts, you don't let them travel to the West, you will have accomplished getting Putin's attention big time.
Yeah, but Trump and his administration levied sanctions, kicked people out of this country. We had this administration, since Biden took office, level 32 sanctions against different individuals and entities in Russia, in addition to kicking out 10 diplomats from the U.S., and yet that really hasn't changed behavior.
Well, first, President Trump's sanctions were, of the lowest order of the sanctions level. That's why I say you go after the oligarchs, those people that Putin have empowered that are also his money pots, and you attach their accounts in the United States, you stop travel to the United States and to the West, believe me, you will get Putin's attention. We've never done that.
Why hasn't that been done already?
Well, that's a good question, that the administration is going to have to face. Now, listen, they're only there 6 months. Why it hasn't happened in the past? Well, with Trump, I wouldn't expect it. He just said just recently, that he had a good meeting with Putin in 2018 and that he, in fact, believed him over our intelligence agencies. I don't understand how my Republican colleagues can continue to embrace that type of thinking. So I wouldn't have expected in the last 4 years. This administration started off with some very significant sanctions. I think depending upon how this meeting goes, we may see a lot more.
I want to pivot to some other news back here at home because Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell suggested the Senate should not open its own probe to look into the secret data collection of members of Congress. He warns that would become a partisan circus. He says the IG investigation is enough. To that, you say what?
I say that obviously Senator McConnell is in a full-time job of trying to cover up for the previous administration. If this was Barack Obama, he'd be crying from the high heavens that, in fact, we need to have an independent investigation. Look, this goes to the very heart of undermining the institutions of government, the checks and balances, the independence of the Congress from the executive branch, no matter who sits there. And you would hope that as an institutionalist, someone who wants to preserve the institution of the Senate and the House of Representatives and the Congress, that he would seek a robust investigation. But what he's doing and what he has continued to do, whether it's January 6th or anything else, is basically to try to protect Republicans from the harsh realities of what the Trump administration did and how far they were willing to undermine the Constitution in order to achieve their political aims.
Senator Bob Menendez, I really appreciate you taking the time, and I hope you'll come back, especially after the summit with Putin, so we can continue our conversation and see what the results are and what comes. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Anna.